He's just the beginning. And as for the televisions...
Your aunt has a manila folder in her lap, and it's thicker than anyone expected a manila folder to be for a meeting that was supposed to take 40 minutes. The lawyer's office has that specific kind of quiet that only exists in rooms where furniture costs more than it needs to. Nobody said much since everyone sat down. Your aunt has been holding that folder against her chest since the parking lot, and now she sets it on the table, and the sound it makes, a soft, heavy thud, more paper in there than anyone accounted for, makes your cousin glance over like he's just now noticing she brought homework to a meeting about their mother's estate. The lawyer starts the way lawyers start these things, going through the will line by line, the property, the accounts, the specific bequests, all of it fairly ordinary, until they get to the part that isn't ordinary at all, the part about the house, and who gets it, and the language your grandmother's estate attorney added 18 months before she died.
In my mind.
Language that names a pattern of undue influence and asks plainly whether anyone in the room can speak to it. That's when your aunt opens the folder. Here's what's inside it, and I want to walk through this slowly, because the contents matter more than the moment. It's not a diary. It's not some dramatic secret document. It's printouts. Ordinary phone screenshots, printed on regular paper, dated in your aunt's handwriting in the corner because she wasn't sure, back then, whether her phone would keep them forever, and some instinct told her paper might outlast an app. And near the bottom of the stack, third from the last page, is a text you sent her in March of 2017. You don't remember sending it as a big moment. That's important to sit with for a second, because most of what ends up mattering in situations like this didn't feel like it mattered while it was happening. You were standing in your kitchen, probably still in your coat, thumb moving fast, because you were annoyed and a little scared and not sure yet how to say what you were noticing out loud to an actual adult in the family without sounding like you were starting something. So you texted your aunt instead, the person you trusted to at least read it seriously, even if she didn't act on it. You'd just come from Grandma's that specific Sunday, and it hadn't gone how it usually went. Normally there'd be 4 or 5 people there by early afternoon, the coffee maker running twice, someone's kids underfoot. That day, it was just you and Grandma and your step-uncle in the next room, half listening, the television louder than it needed to be.
Fundraiser with my pals. You'll never need another set.
Grandma had asked, almost in passing, whether you'd heard from her friend Carol lately, and you hadn't thought anything of it until you realized, driving home, that you couldn't remember the last time Carol's name had come up naturally, the way it used to, every visit, without anyone having to ask. The text said, more or less, and I'm paraphrasing only slightly because the actual wording matters here, that you'd noticed your step-uncle steering Grandma away from her old friends. Not aggressively, nothing you could point to as one clean, reportable incident. Small redirections, a canceled outing here, a comment there about how tiring visitors were becoming for her, a slow thinning of the people who used to come by on Sundays until it was mostly just him, managing her calendar, her medications, her signature on things. You wrote, "I think something's happening, and nobody else is going to say it, so I'm saying it to you." Your aunt read it in 2017 and did what most people do with an uncomfortable text from a family member who tends to notice things. She said something reassuring back, probably something like, "He's just protective of her," or, "You know how she gets when she's tired," or maybe nothing quite that dismissive, but close enough in spirit that you got the message, this isn't going anywhere tonight. And then, and this is the detail that actually explains the folder sitting on the table right now, she saved it anyway. Screenshotted it, put it somewhere, not because she believed you yet, because some smaller, quieter part of her wasn't sure enough that you were wrong to just let it disappear into the scroll of forgotten messages the way everything else does. That's the whole hinge of this story, honestly. Not that she believed you immediately. She didn't, and it would be dishonest to pretend otherwise. What she did was something smaller and, in its own way, more useful. She kept the option open. She let the possibility survive somewhere, even while she was, out loud, telling you it probably wasn't anything. Let's talk about what happened between that kitchen and this office, because none of it happened the way a movie would stage it. There was no single dramatic confrontation. What happened instead was slower and more boring. In the specific way, real harm is usually more boring than fiction prepares you for. The Sunday visits thinned further. Then they stopped being Sundays at all, replaced by phone calls he'd sit in on, a hand visible in the corner of every video chat, always some reason he needed to be present for. Then a new financial advisor, one nobody else had met, recommended by him. Then a small change to the house title that everyone found out about 18 months after it happened, almost by accident, when a cousin was helping sort through paperwork for something unrelated and found a document with a date on it that didn't match anyone's memory of when that conversation supposedly took place. None of these things on their own would hold up as anything. That's actually the whole design of how this kind of harm operates, if you want to call it a design. Nothing single is ever damning. It's the accumulation, the direction, the fact that every small change moved the exact same way.
I thought my jokes were bad.
Toward the exact same outcome, for years, quietly, while everyone else in the family kept telling each other some version of, "He's just protective," because that story was so much easier to live inside than the alternative. You weren't in the room for most of that. You'd stepped back a while before any of it became visible to the rest of the family, and I want to be honest about why, because it's not a small detail. You stepped back because you'd said the thing once, gotten the reassuring non-answer, and understood, correctly, that saying it again and again would just cost you standing in the family without changing anything about what was actually happening in that house. That's not giving up. People love to call it giving up, from the outside, safely, without having tried to be the one voice in a room that's already decided what story it wants to believe. What you did was closer to triage. You'd used the one tool you had, telling someone who might listen, and when it didn't move anything, you conserved the rest of yourself, instead of spending years being the difficult one for a fight that wasn't yours alone to win. Here's the part that actually surprised your aunt, she told your cousin later, in the hallway outside the lawyer's office, in a voice that had gone somewhere quieter than her usual register. She said she didn't go looking for your text. She wasn't building a case. What happened was smaller and stranger than that. She was helping the estate attorney assemble a timeline, just going back through old messages to establish when certain changes started, purely administrative, the kind of task that feels more like data entry than anything emotional. And there it was, sitting in the middle of an unrelated search, dated 8 years before any of this needed a folder or a lawyer or a meeting like this one. Your handwriting on her printout, dated in the corner. Your actual words, from a version of you standing in a kitchen with no idea any of this was coming, describing with almost embarrassing precision the exact shape of what the estate attorney was now describing, in careful legal language, as a documented pattern of undue influence. She told your cousin she read it 3 times before she could keep sorting through the rest of the folder. Not because the content shocked her. She already knew, by then, everything the text described, all of it long since confirmed by things that happened after. What stopped her was the date, 8 years. 8 years between you noticing it in real time, in a kitchen, in your coat, and the rest of the family having a name for it at all. I want to slow down on something here, because it would be easy to let this become a story about being right, and being right is the smallest part of what actually happened. The bigger thing is this. You saw a pattern before it had a name, before there was language for it, before anyone else had the specific vantage point required to see it, because you were paying a kind of attention that cost you something to keep paying. That's not the same as being clever or perceptive in some effortless way people like to imagine. It's the result of actually watching, carefully, uncomfortably, a relationship you cared about, closely enough to catch something moving in the wrong direction, while it was still small enough that most people wouldn't have noticed anything at all. Nobody thanks you for that in the moment. That's just true, and there's no version of this story where I pretend otherwise. You don't get a medal for noticing early. Mostly what you get is the accusation that comes standard with noticing early. That you're reading into things, that you're the one with the problem, that families are complicated, and maybe you're the complication. You carried that accusation for 8 years without anyone officially retracting it, because retractions like that don't usually get issued out loud. They get issued quietly, in hallways, in the specific silence of an aunt rereading a printout 3 times before she can keep working. Let me tell you what happened back in that conference room, because this is the part that actually landed, more than any explanation could. The lawyer read your text out loud, in full, because the estate attorney wanted it entered into the file as supporting documentation, part of the timeline establishing when family members first raised concerns. And your aunt, reading it out loud herself, actually, she asked to be the one to read it, which nobody expected, got about 2/3 through before her voice did something none of you had heard it do before. Not crying exactly. Something quieter and more clenched than that. The sound of a person realizing in real time, out loud, in front of witnesses, that she'd known something for 8 years and let a family story override it. Your cousin, sitting across the table, the one who'd spent years closest to your step-uncle, closest to the version of events where nothing strange was happening at all, went very still during that reading. Not defensive, just still, the way a person gets when a floor they'd been standing on turns out to have had a crack in it the whole time, one they'd walked past daily without ever looking down. Nobody said the words "I told you so" in that room, and I want to be specific about why, because it matters. It wasn't restraint exactly, and it wasn't generosity either. It's that the sentence didn't fit what the room actually needed. "I told you so" is for small disagreements, arguments about directions or dinner plans, moments where being right is basically the whole point. This wasn't that. What the room needed, and what it mostly got, in its slow, awkward, adult way, was something closer to a reckoning with how a family decides, collectively, without ever voting on it, which voice gets believed and which voice gets managed. You were the second kind for 8 years. Nobody in that room needed you to say it. The folder had already said it for you, in your own handwriting, on paper that had outlasted several arguments about whether you were the difficult one. The estate attorney, who has done this specific kind of work for a long time, mentioned something afterward, almost as an aside, while she was gathering the folder back up to make copies for the file. She said this exact pattern shows up more often than people expect, and it almost never gets caught by the person you'd think would catch it. Not lawyers, not doctors, not the financial institutions that are supposedly trained to flag this sort of thing. It gets caught, when it gets caught at all, by the one family member who happened to be paying close enough attention early, and who almost always gets dismissed for it at the time, because the alternative, believing that someone trusted, is slowly reshaping an elderly relative's entire world, is so much harder to sit with than believing the person who noticed is overreacting. She said she's read dozens of documents like your text over the years. Different families, different details, same shape almost every time. Early, specific, dismissed, and eventually proven right by the accumulation of exactly the things it predicted. She didn't say this to make anyone in the room feel better. She said it, your aunt thought afterward, almost like she was naming a law of physics rather than making an observation. This is just how it tends to go, in family after family, and there was no particular comfort intended in saying so. But it landed anyway, in its own way, because it meant your family's version of this story wasn't some unique failure of character. It was a pattern common enough that a stranger in a suit, working from a different city, on a completely different family's estate the month before, could have predicted the exact shape of the dismissal you lived through years before it happened to you specifically. Here's something worth sitting with, something your aunt actually said out loud in the hallway afterward, unprompted, to nobody in particular. She said she used to think saving that text was about being careful, covering some future possibility, a kind of quiet insurance. Looking back, she said, she thinks it was something else. She thinks some part of her believed you the whole time, underneath the reassuring things she said out loud. And saving the text was the only way that belief had to express itself, without her having to admit, in the moment, that she was choosing comfort over confrontation. The paper was the honest version of her. The reassurance was just what she could manage to say out loud at the time. That's worth something, even 8 years late. Not everything. 8 years is 8 years, and there's no folder thick enough to hand you those years back. No legal document that restores what it cost you to be the person who saw it early and got treated like the problem for saying so. I'm not going to pretend a manila folder fixes that, but it does something smaller and real. It moves you, permanently, out of a story you never should have been placed inside to begin with. You're not the dramatic one anymore. You're not the difficult one. You're the one who was right early enough that it took a lawyer, a will, and a family reckoning to catch up to what you already knew standing in your kitchen, in your coat, thumb moving fast, before any of this had a name. Think about what it actually took to be that person for 8 years without anyone confirming you were right. No lawyer was coming. No folder existed yet. You just had to carry the knowledge that something was wrong, privately, mostly alone, while people you loved kept choosing the easier story over the one you were describing. That's not a small thing to have done quietly, with no one telling you along the way that the discomfort was worth it. Most people don't manage that. Most people, faced with being called dramatic once, go quiet permanently and let the family story win by default, because the cost of being disbelieved again and again is genuinely exhausting to keep paying. You paid it anyway, for exactly as long as it took, and then you stepped back, not because you stopped caring, but because you'd run out of ways to keep saying the same true thing to people who'd already decided not to hear it. Your grandmother's house will get sorted out through whatever legal process it needs now, slowly, the way these things do, with more meetings after this one, and more folders probably still to come. That part isn't really the point anymore, even though it's technically what the lawyer's office exists to handle. The actual point already happened, back in that room, in the 2/3 of a sentence your aunt couldn't quite finish reading out loud without her voice catching. That was the moment the 8 years finally closed. Not because you demanded it, because a folder she'd kept without fully admitting to herself why finally did the explaining for you. Your cousin called you 2 days later, not to apologize outright. That came later, clumsily, in a text he clearly rewrote a few times before sending, the kind where you can feel the extra effort in how carefully ordinary it's trying to sound. The call itself was shorter than that, quieter, mostly just him asking questions about things he was only now willing to look at directly. Whether you remembered other moments he'd missed, whether there were other Sundays that had changed shape without him noticing, the way the friend group photos had thinned out over the years without anyone marking the exact date it happened. You answered what you could. Some of it you'd genuinely forgotten too, because you'd stopped keeping close track once it became clear nobody wanted the tracking done out loud. There's a particular kind of tired that comes after a conversation like that, different from the tired of the meeting itself. It's the tired of realizing that being right, even 8 years right, doesn't hand you back the version of those years where you got to just be a granddaughter, uncomplicatedly, instead of the one who noticed something and had to decide, over and over, how many times it was worth saying before you let it go. Nobody hands you those years back. Not the lawyer, not the folder, not your cousin's careful apology text. That's just true, and I'm not going to dress it up as anything other than what it is. Make the coffee tomorrow. Go to whatever ordinary Tuesday is waiting for you, the one with no estate lawyer and no folder and no family meeting in it at all. You don't need any of that to know what you saw back in 2017 was real. You knew it standing in your kitchen before anyone else was ready to. The paperwork just finally agreed with you, 8 years late, in someone else's handwriting on the outside of the page, and your own words, unchanged, on the inside of it.